I'm joined by the team from Cooper Grace War. That's Clinton Jackson, Scott Hay Bartlam, and Fletch Heineman. Welcome. Probably the most exciting, or one of the most exciting panel discussions for the SPA conference, fighting with the ATO. How good is that? What's the strategy? What's the basic strategy for, should you fight? Maybe that's the first question.
I think if you don't have to fight, then don't fight. And I think our experience is that the more work that you do up front to avoid the fights, the better off that you're going to be.
All right, let's go to the start of the process. So you file your return, or whatever it is. How does the interest from the ATO actually occur? Like, how does it arrive? Is it a knock on the door? Get down!
Well, hopefully you don't get a raid, although they do occur. Sometimes actually you'll get a really innocuous looking letter from the ATO, which is a polite, we've noticed something based on our data matching, and we think that there's a risk area on that. And sometimes that letter's a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing because people don't respond to it properly, or they don't respond at all, which is a risk. So if you get that letter, send them a nice letter back.
Okay. So the strategy is, if you've been notified, is to first of all to answer.
But to have a really good think about the answer. So you actually give a reasoned, sensible response that deals with the issues and think about the way the ATO will look at it. And we've had situations where people have done responses, but they weren't very well thought through, and it triggered more questions and got them into trouble, and it led to some ambiguities, and we had to work to sort of try and get around what they've said.
Okay, so when they do contact you, there's definitely an issue. So, sorry, that's not what I meant to say was, so for those people who just put their head in the sand and go, look, it's like a credit card statement sometimes, you just get the bill and
Yes.
go, meh, I'll just deal with it later. The first rule with the ATO is do not deal with it later. Deal with it now.
Yep.
Okay, next step.
Well, the next step is to make sure that you do a lot of work up front. So you've got one chance to make a good impression with the ATO, and it's really important not to waste that chance. So if you give a really sketchy short response, if the ATO asks a question and you give a one-line answer.
So just give me an example.
So for example, the ATO may say, we've seen this money coming into your account, please explain. And if you give a one-sentence explanation that doesn't cut off the risk from the ATO's point of view.
I earned it.
I earned it and I paid tax on it.
Yeah. Or I won at gambling.
Yeah.
Right.
Quite commonly, if you don't answer that question properly, the ATO will come and have a further look. Maybe not your raid, but definitely an audit.
Yeah.
And that's when these things escalate. So.
Okay. So let's talk about the actual topic of fighting with the ATO. When would you fight?
We always fight with the ATO.
Right.
We love it.
You love, but that's your job though. What about for me, the client, sitting there going, when do I want you to fight with the ATO?
I think our experience is that the ATO often form a position quite early on, and it can be difficult to turn them around during the process. So that's where you have to actually be tough and stick to your guns, and to say, no, based on the law and sometimes just the Commissioner's interpretation of the law, then an ATO auditor must make this decision. SUPA is really interesting because there's lots of areas where the ATO has an opportunity to exercise the discretion in your favour. So it's real cap in hand stuff to the ATO, and people get a bit funny about that because they think they're asking for a favour, but really there's quite a lot of law around when the ATO has to exercise their discretion in your favour.
Okay, so just to be clear, that they do have discretionary powers, so there's probably no point fronting up, as an extroverted male bull type person, having a red hot go. If you can avoid that, the way to do it is, as you say, cap in hand.
Yeah, look, it depends, and
It's not sucking up to them.
It's not sucking up, and it depends who you've got on the other side, and it's a real person versus person type situation. Then you have to gauge the person that you're dealing with at the ATO, and we've had people who have had interactions with the ATO, and I think you could say that the ATO auditor's probably very enthusiastic in the way that they're collecting revenue in terms of their approach. So, in that situation, you've got to be tough. You've got to stick to your guns.
Okay, but some people probably forget that we do have to pay tax. the tax, I mean, I get tax minimisation, but there's a lot of, well, we all know people who go, well, this is why should I? But that's really what runs our welfare state and builds our roads. And so you do have to actually pay something. That might be something to remember as well.
You do, but sometimes the ATO doesn't have all the facts, or it's actually more information gathering, and you can give them the information which then removes the issue. And it's a matter of knowing when the information to give to deal with the problem, versus actually, you have made a mistake and you're trying to mitigate the client's loss.
Okay, what's the point where you go doggo and just belly up and...
When you're in trouble.
Right.
Yeah. If you're in real trouble, then it becomes a damage minimisation type exercise. So you put your hand up for the tax and you do your best to avoid paying a penalty.
Okay, and there's no point, as a fella I know turns around and pulls the tax officer aside and literally said something like, I've got no assets, you can't get me, so try and play matey like that, but strong arm them, say I'll just go bankrupt and you can get staffed. Bad strategy.
Yeah, bad strategy. I've had a client...
I mean, that's what he's doing.
I had a client that took a similar approach and the ATO said, okay, well, we're going to prosecute you. So then you're embroiled in a whole lot of stuff. So a delicate way to deal with that, and I'd say probably not be so gung-ho about the response.
We're talking about men though, men with money, so...
Yeah. And look, that's part of the job as well, is to making sure that the client's got the idea in terms of the strategy for responding.
Okay. And I guess last and certainly not least is seek proper, credible advice and help.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, from our point of view, we see mistakes that are made in preliminary responses to the ATO, and I think every advisor that's made that mistake would, love to have a second crack at it and do a more thorough job.
So maybe that's part of the answer as well, is that when you get that letter, when you get that innocuous, correspondence, is that the moment you go and actually seek proper legal help to say, here's my issue, what's probably the best way to respond to this? Is that maybe the first step?
Yeah, certainly, that's it. And the way that we interact with our clients, being advisors themselves of taxpayers, is very much to have a collaborative approach with them, so that if there's something that they're just unsure about, maybe that they're comfortable responding to the ATO, but it's just, Fletch, Scott, Clinton, can you please have a quick look over this, make sure I'm not missing anything obvious. We don't need to become involved in any great detail, but if it does start to turn ugly, then we're already briefed on it.
Right, okay, good. All right. Thanks for your time. Anything else? Have I missed something?
You going to talk about the cricket?
Go Mitchell. Thanks. Good on you guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.